Welcome back to Gen Z Speaks. We're back with another episode. With me today, my usual co-hosts, the future of Intel, Jenish Thanki. How you doing, man?
Doing good, man.
Good to know, good to know. And then, last but not least, the future of real estate, the soon-to-be real estate mogul, Matthew Gutierrez. Man, how are you doing?
Doing all right, man. Wiped out surfing this morning, but doing all right. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing good, hanging in there. I finally moved back to my apartment in LA. Looking forward to starting off the school year in person finally after 18 months. But yeah, let's just dive right in. So when we recorded the podcast last week, we got a lot of engagement in terms of what we were saying about the vaccine mandate. Me and you, Matt, have different perspectives, but I feel like both sides of the aisle kind of hated us for it. And so really quickly, a lot of people on TikTok and Instagram Reels were saying that they were basically like saying Americans have the right to do whatever they want. And like, if I'm not going to get the vaccine, I'm fine with America giving the vaccine to other people. And then people were in favor of vaccines, were basically like, arguing back and forth on our TikTok accounts and Instagram Reels, basically disagreeing. So in my opinion, just really quickly on the vaccine thing, and I don't want to sound repetitive, but I really think that I'm more pessimistic about it more than ever, because I feel like people who are already going to get the vaccine have pretty much gotten it, and we're not going to see increased levels of vaccinations anymore. Just my opinion, and especially because of the booster shot, since it was recently approved by the FDA for immunocompromised people. I think it's eventually going to have to be approved for everyone who's gotten the vaccine, and a lot of people have skipped their second shot. So I just don't see how we're going to reach a herd immunity of like 90 to 95%. So I'm really pessimistic about this, and I just don't see how we can get out of it. I don't know if you guys want to quickly talk about that, or we can move on.
No, I think we can move on, but I do agree. I don't think people are going to be going and getting the booster shots and becoming more vaccinated. So I do agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Andrew Cuomo resigned since the last time we talked.
Right.
In one of his exit, yeah, finally, in one of his exit interviews, he was like, "This is the best thing that I think was possible for the New York residents for me to resign." I mean, he spoke as if like he had a choice. He had no other choice. He was going to get impeached. And you know what? What's crazy is that he still has around $18 million in campaign funds that he can use for a potential run. And because New York lets governors be in office for 4 terms, which is 16 years, he can actually run for another term because he wasn't impeached. So,
Wow.
You never know what might happen in the world of politics, but it'll be fascinating to see what happens.
I didn't see his resignation speech. Did he like high road it or something?
Yeah, he basically like reiterated some of the main points that he was saying, and he was like, he apologized and said that I'm going to step aside in 14 days. But it was mostly some of the same BS that he'd been saying all along. So yeah.
Yeah. Figured.
Let's just move on to what's
Right.
happening, the topical issue. So the biggest story I think of the week is what's happening in Afghanistan. Basically, President Biden announced a couple months back that he would be pulling back all the United States troops that are stationed in Afghanistan by September 11th. That would mark the 20-year anniversary, right, of the start of the war on terror. And what's happened since is that the Taliban have basically taken over much of the entire country. They just entered the capital, Kabul, and the president of Afghanistan has fled the country. And it seems like the Taliban are pretty much in control. Again, like there's so much nuance to this, right? I'm seeing a lot of anchors and news media outlets cover this in various ways. A lot of people are surprised by the speed at which the Taliban have been, able to take over a lot of these cities. But honestly, if you'd been following the situation like I had, I'm not really surprised to see what's happening. And just before we dive in and have a conversation about this, like I said before, I think it's really good to just like know the overall history of the area. So I don't want to go back, all the way thousands of years, but basically, if we want to talk about the 19th century or the 20th century, basically the British tried to control Afghanistan. They were successful at first, but then they were not successful. And, long story short, basically in the 1970s or the 1980s, I shall say, the Soviet Union basically took control of Afghanistan. And what happened was that the Soviet Union took control of Afghanistan, and the United States obviously was, in this Cold War, and so they supported, insurgent groups. They were known as the Mujahideen in Afghanistan that fought back against the Soviet control. And the U.S. didn't directly send any troops. They sent like military aid through like other countries like Pakistan. They sent in more money. And what happened was the Mujahideen were successful in terms of eliminating the Soviets out. And so once the Soviets were out, a small faction of a lot of Islamist extremists was formed called the Taliban. They're not really Islamic. They're just Islamic in name. Nothing they do is Islamic. And they basically controlled Afghanistan for the next 4 to 5 years. And obviously when 9/11 happened, the US intelligence agencies discovered that, a portion of Al-Qaeda under Osama bin Laden was hiding out in Afghanistan. And so they invaded Afghanistan. And for a short period of time, it seemed like the invasion had been successful, but 20 years later, nothing has been accomplished, essentially. The country is still doing, is still basically at what it was back in 2001 and before that. And I just want to give you guys some statistics, right, to just emphasize how bad the United States has basically done in Afghanistan. So approximately $2 trillion have been spent in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And the very, it's sad, right, about the financing information about the war is that the entire, almost all of this financing has been done through debt. And so, usually if for war periods, a lot of governments, they either issue war bonds or they increase taxes. For these wars in Afghanistan and in Iraq, what's happened is that the entire thing has been financed through debt. And the interest on this debt is set to be about $6.5 trillion by 2048. So the interest will be basically more than the initial debt accrued by 2048. And again, most of this is going to be taken on by the US taxpayers. In terms of US service members lost in Afghanistan, 2,448. In terms of the Afghan police forces and military forces, approximately 66,000 people have died. The percentage of Afghani's teenage girls that are able to even read today is 37%, which is just astounding. And just for some perspective, in like previous wars, like let's say the Korean War, right? President Truman temporarily had to raise taxes by 92% for the top tax rate levels, right? Same thing with the war in Vietnam. Lyndon Johnson, under his administration, financed some of that through increase in tax payments. George Bush cut taxes for the top income earners by 8%. And so my point is the US has spent a shit ton of money on this and nothing has been accomplished. There's obviously a variety of reasons why the US has been unsuccessful, partly because Afghanistan is known as the graveyard of empires. If you're a student of history like me, you know well enough that no empire has really been able to, have a strong foothold in Afghanistan. Somehow every single force has basically failed to take the land of Afghanistan. And so it's called the graveyard of empires. But I just want to get your perspective on this. What do you guys think the US did wrong? Was it morally justified? And where do you see this going?
So first of all, I have a question.
Mhm.
And maybe I don't know if you know about this, but what has the Taliban done now? Are they trying to establish some sort of government or some sort of like way to rule or over the people, or what? Do you know what's going on right now?
Yeah, so still a lot of things are still a little bit unclear, but what they have started to do is, again, they have like their mouthpieces, their propaganda press people saying, oh, we don't really plan on doing drastic changes. But what they've, I'll give you a basic example. So there's beauty salons in Kabul, right? And they have like, they have like, advertisements of women, like, showing to using their beauty products, et cetera. So a lot of the Taliban forces started painting over them. And they basically are going to go back to how Afghanistan was pre 9/11, which was obviously like very stringent rules and regulations. And it's very crazy because the way the Taliban make money is through, opium trades, drug trafficking, kidnap payments, ransom. I mean, there's estimates that they made like $400 billion in opium drug trafficking. And so they, have a lot of wealthy backers, wealthy individual donors. Again, like I said, they make most of their money through drug trafficking, other illicit means. And so they use, very stringent policies and regulations to come off as Islamic, but they're not really Islamic, right? It's just a facade to back up or recruit more soldiers to stand united. And so far for them, it has worked, right? They have this sense of morale that they're fighting against the West, they're fighting against the US, and they're fighting for Islam, but they're not Islamic. As I said, nothing to do is Islamic at all. And they're just, go ahead.
Yeah, I just feel like, I don't know why we should have been out like 10 years ago. It seems like, I don't know. Even I feel like years ago, people were saying, what are we doing there? What are we doing there? Nothing's being accomplished. And I don't know why why we're just going out now. Even maybe after they killed Osama bin Laden, they're like, okay, we'll leave now or something. I don't know what they were trying to accomplish more. They're trying to establish a government. Like, what? I don't know what they were trying to do there, but it just seems like it's a little too late now to leave. I mean, it's still good we left, but it just feels like it's.
Weren't they trying to establish like a U.S. democracy to try to like create a makeshift democracy like we have over there and attempt to benefit them? But in my opinion, I don't think that should even happen. I think the culture of the United States versus the Middle East is completely different.
It's not gonna mix.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. People here act differently. Your attitudes differently, and not necessarily. I don't think a tyranny is any useful, but I don't believe that maybe a democracy would be the best for them, or maybe even a makeshift democracy for them would be better. Not what we have. I think everywhere should be dealt with differently, just based on how the people are and what the people actually want. They didn't even want what we were giving them. That's the craziest part to me. We were giving a country something that we thought was good for them, yet they did not want that.
Exactly.
Kind of reminds me of Vietnam a little bit too. It's that whole dynamic with the U.S. just trying to go on to other people and just trying to, establish our culture onto them.
Well, the USSR was trying to do the same thing, right? So I think we're just fighting our battle through.
That was like the Cold War, I guess.
It's a Cold War.
Yeah.
It's this concept called helping them help themselves, right? And it never really works out. You can't really help someone help themselves. It doesn't make any sense to me.
You can offer, right? But you can't force that.
Right. And it's been America's longest war. It's 20 years, like trillions of dollars. I mean, like I saw a tweet by a comedian. He said that America can't even figure out their own schools and healthcare system, and we spend $2 trillion in some other country trying to help them. Right? It doesn't make any sense. And I think it's part of a bigger conversation, right? This military industrial complex
100%.
That keeps on like saying, oh no, we need more forces there. We can't leave. Look at, and they use these moral arguments, which don't get me wrong. The moral repercussions of US withdrawal are huge. The Taliban don't care about any sort of moral. So they're going to slaughter everyone who supported the US. They're going to slaughter or basically assassinate everyone who acted as a translator or helped the US Army forces in any way. So the moral repercussions are huge. But at what point does the US justify, the continuation of this waste of tax dollars and just an incoherent policy? I feel like the US were trying to build out the Afghani army like the United States Army, which is, backed by technology and a lot of aerial support. And that's one of the reasons why the Afghani army failed, right? Is because the United States decision makers were making a model out of the US Army. They wanted the Afghanistan army to, be similar to the US Army, but that just can't work, right? You have to have a very more nuanced strategy. And again, I'm no military expert, but we interviewed Ty Smith, right? The Navy SEAL who served in Afghanistan and Iraq. And he said the same thing we're saying. What did we accomplish, right? Those places are exactly the same as they were. And it just seems as if you look at history, like a lot of strong countries and powerful nations think that they know better than other countries, and it's this vanity, this proud belief, and this delusion that we alone can fix it, and when what we're doing is right, and it's not going to be as hard as other people say. So again,
what do you think about this? So we're talking about how the opium, obviously there's an opium line through the Middle East, and a lot of wars have happened because of that drug trade. And I guess it's still technically nothing's proven, but it's pretty obvious that it's kind of happening. That, I mean, it's been proven that the United States has been involved with the war on drugs, and they've been involved on the other side of the hand where they kind of dealt with the drugs, right, through subsidiary parties. And so what do you think about that? Do you think a lot of this war has been because of that money from opium? Obviously, it's the #1 drug in the world to produce the amount of capital that it's produced. And obviously it's happening through the Middle East. We've been in the Middle East. This war is going on for ages and there's really no purpose. But the only point of being there would possibly be that opium. Like, that's the only light, I'd say, at the US's end of the tunnel. What do you think about that?
No. So the way the Taliban make money is through the opium. But in terms of a question why the U.S. is there, well, the U.S. had a lot of like contractual obligations, right? Like military
Not why.
contracts.
I'm not asking why they're there. I'm asking, do you think that this opium is
No,
involved? You don't think so?
no. I think that's how the Taliban make the money. Again, like I don't know the specific circumstances of on the ground, what happens in Afghanistan. Obviously, there's illicit drug making all over the world. There's illicit drug trafficking all over the world. Obviously, the Taliban, that's like one of their primary sources of revenue. I don't think the U.S. Benefits anything from it. No, I do think they benefit. Obviously, the big military contractors, right? They benefit from our weapons they develop, right? It's like a constant source of revenue for the last 20 years. All these military
Right.
contractors, they just like go to the U.S. and be like, "Hey, you need weapons, right? We'll make them for you." Boom. And the defense budget, like I think we've discussed this on the podcast, is around $800 billion, which is just insane
Yeah.
to me. So
Yeah, I remember in one of my econ classes, we're talking about the budget for the military and how it's so ridiculous how the military will not only give this, $800 billion. That's already a lot of money, right? But say the Navy, say their portion, let's say 1/4 of this, 200 billion, just as an example. If they use, say they use 100 billion that year, if they don't go ahead and use 100 billion by the end of the next fiscal year, they won't receive that. They'll only receive half of that amount, which is 100 billion the next year. And so what will the Navy do? They want the entire budget, right? And so they'll go ahead and mass produce. And what they'll do is they'll go into the ocean and they'll just send off like rockets, they'll send off like grenades, and they'll like just completely absorb that budget and just use it and use that money to produce these weapons and arbitrarily use them into the oblivion, nothing. So
Waste,
it's
right?
just, it's a waste. That's
Right.
exactly how you describe it, a waste. And that's
think-
taxpayers' dollars that's just going to waste, which I am not okay with.
Exactly. And I think a lot of veterans were saying like what we dedicated all this time and effort, right, to the country of Afghanistan, what was it all of it for if our leaders, right, those people in positions of power who made those strategic decisions or the overall strategy, if they weren't clear about this whole thing from the beginning, why were they, giving service members a false sense of hope? Why were they giving them these different missions that amounted to obviously nothing? And the Taliban just took back control of the country. It kind of reminds me of this Afghani proverb. It basically says, "You may have the watches, but we have the time." And if you look at history about, like I was saying, Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires. That's basically what happened, right? The U.S. came in to the country. They didn't understand the culture, the different ethnicities, the different practices, and they basically took this sword and the power of the gun, and they thought they were seeking revenge, right, from Al Qaeda, from Osama bin Laden. By the way, the United States trained Osama bin Laden back in the 1980s. The CIA was really big on helping the Mujahideen back, as I said, in Afghanistan to help fight off the Soviets. So I just think that, President, now what's fascinating to see is the political implications of this, because people are saying, Biden should not have pulled out all the troops, that it's his fault that, he pulled out all the troops. And some people are saying, well, Donald Trump already had, an establishment of a deal with the Taliban that the U.S. would eventually pull out troops, but they're saying that the way Biden did it so immediately and with a certain deadline, it wasn't the best way to do it. I honestly think that at a certain point in time, this was inevitable. The Taliban had already been slowly gathering the control of the surrounding land, and eventually they sped up that operation when President Biden announced it. But I think it was inevitable. I think Biden made the right call. I think what will be cowardly of him to do now is if he goes back and says, "Oh, I'm not abiding by my deadline of September 11. I'm gonna like continue to add more troops, and maybe we'll do it next year. So I don't think he'll do that, but if he does that, that'll be cowardly of him. I like his decision to pull back troops because at the end of the day, the war has to end. And it's sad to say, but Biden is going to be the fall guy. I mean, Biden is going to have to live with the consequences of a decision, and it's like I don't know how to deal with the morality aspect of it because obviously, a lot of people, a lot of children, families, and women are going to die, and it's I just don't know how to think about that aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I think that's a deep question, and I feel like we could talk about that for literally a whole hour. The whole moral question, underlining behind the whole war. But I think I'm gonna move on to another topic that we all love, and that's crypto. So, as you guys know, or maybe you guys don't know, the Senate is in the process of passing an infrastructure bill. This is a $550 billion bill that will pretty much pay for infrastructure such as road, water, broadband, and all the different types of infrastructure that are important to the US. However, the politicians are also debating whether to add an infrastructure plan for cryptocurrencies. So many of the politicians want to be able to tax cryptocurrency exchanges in the similar fashion that they tax stock exchanges. So there's a lot to this. But just to summarize it, pretty much politicians are trying to regulate crypto, right? And firstly,
which is the whole purpose of crypto, which is not to be regulated.
Exactly, that's what I'm gonna get to. But there's a lot of faults to this though. So firstly, to regulate crypto, it's not just as simple as like looking at data or looking at some numbers. You also have to be able to look at the code because all the transactions are done in code, and it's not just you can just look at a sheet of data and look at, hey, this is what happened, right? You have to be able to understand the code and what's going on. So, and as far as I'm aware, we don't have regulators that understand code and look through code. So that's already a huge problem right there. Like this is actually kind of revolutionary. Like countries are going to be able to look at code to regulate all these different types of cryptos and all these other technologies that are emerging. Also, secondly, this is just like kind of an afterthought that I had is the people that are proposing this bill, like I feel like they don't really understand what crypto is and what's going on. Like you see at some of the Congress hearings, you see like people are mistaking like iPhones for Androids, and like they don't even know how Google works, how Facebook works, and they're trying to regulate crypto. It just seems like they need to bring in more professionals and more people that are tech savvy, I guess, and try to help with that rather than just trying to understand how this complex technology is working by themselves. But yeah, and as Matt said, it just feels like crypto is literally invented to be not regulated, and they're trying to regulate crypto. And I guess they're trying to get taxes out of it. And I was also informed that the CEO of Coinbase is heavily against this bill. So
I think every crypto guy is
that's the thing.
It's not okay.
So there's a lot here, but I wanted to get your guys' opinions on what do you guys think about this. Obviously we said crypto is not something to be regulated, but this is a huge step potentially in a lot of countries. A lot of other countries are trying to implement crypto into their society, into their economy, and maybe regulating it in a certain manner will help you integrate it into your economy. But I don't know how that, like, what is the correct way to implement it. So what do you guys think?
So I think that first off, I think crypto, just listening to like the creators of Ethereum and Cardano, it seems as if that crypto is going to be a universal currency. It's going to be a universal currency, and that is extremely, extremely beneficial for us because obviously right now there's currency traders, right? And you see these guys, and what they'll do is they'll try to find their triangular arbitrage to profit off of trading from USD to maybe a Thai baht into a UK pound. But through this simple like platform of just having Bitcoin, of just having Ethereum, the whole world will just move like seamlessly, it'll seem like, right? Because now you don't have to just buy product in the US for the US dollar. you can go ahead and use that crypto and go, to the Congo and buy whatever they're selling over there. And so it just seems like a much more efficient process. And I don't feel that the government should be taking control of this as they're taking control of everything. I mean, the internet hasn't necessarily been controlled, but the whole purpose of the internet originally was was a platform for people to go on, and similar as blockchain, right? So nobody can actually touch it. They can just go on there freely and seamlessly without any restrictions and etc. So I think that's a big problem. And I also want to touch on how Amazon and Twitter recently wanted to piggyback off of Elon Musk's his Tesla implication of Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I think it's very interesting because I think as these big corps, obviously they own billions of dollars worth of cryptocurrency. And as they own it, they're going to want people to implement it, because as they own more of it, the prices are going to go up. And if they implement it, more people are going to be interested in it, wanting to purchase products off of Twitter, off of Amazon from this. And so I think prices will only go up in the long run. But I mean, not necessarily. Yeah. So that's my opinion of where crypto's going and how this is all playing out and why the surge is really happening.
Yeah, man.
So,
I definitely just real quick.
Jenish, I have a question. Okay, go ahead.
I definitely agree with your thing about whole, seamlessly transitioning to, like, you can go to a different country and you just have your Ethereum wallet in your phone and that's all you use, right? You use it.
Right.
But the problem is that a lot of these countries, taxes, right? That's the whole problem. They need to be, the governments need to be able to earn money from taxes, and that's why cryptos are so dangerous to governments.
They
right
want to. They want to. They don't need to. They want to.
Well, let's say if every transaction right now was done through crypto, right? How are people going to be able, like, there's like sales tax, for example. How is that going to be collected, right? We don't have a system.
But I don't
for
agree that it should be taxed. I don't agree that. Oh, you're saying for the sales tax through Ethereum? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Oh,
like,
gotcha.
If you make any transaction, right?
Yeah.
The tax, right? So certain tax is going to go to the government. With crypto, that doesn't exist. There's no tax there.
No, right. You're right. Yeah.
This is the problem, that governments find crypto super scary, because, like, I can make let's say I buy a $50,000 car in California. It's like a $5,000 tax, right?
Yeah.
If I buy it through crypto, that's just $50,000. That's
right.
the whole thing. Go ahead, Ibrahim. You were saying.
Yeah, well, so what you guys, just for the perspective of the audience and the listeners, we're just discussing an amendment within the infrastructure bill that the Senate passed. And in that amendment, tell me if I'm wrong, Jenish, but from my understanding, this amendment basically would mandate a lot of these exchanges, crypto exchanges, to report transactional information right to the IRS and to the Treasury Department, and it would levy some sort of tax. Is that right?
Right. That is correct.
And that would hinder in the natural technological innovation that crypto needs, and it doesn't, and the regulation and these increased regulation on it would hinder its progress in terms of just improving their underlying technology, right? Is that right?
Well, I don't know about hinder. I guess to be able to take into consider all these regulations, the developers will need to create some more infrastructure for the regulations, I guess. So I guess in a way it would hinder, but I don't know what you mean by hinder, like just like eliminate progress. Is that what you were meaning?
No. So I meant, so it wouldn't, so it basically would give them more work to do, which would not save their time, right? So it wouldn't expedite things. It would backtrack them, and they would have to, like,
That's
work
true,
around.
yeah.
Gotcha.
That's true. You have to work around the regulation, obviously, right?
So crypto wouldn't be able to keep up with the pace that it is with these increased, or added regulations, basically.
Yeah, and like the point I mentioned, that it's going to be really difficult to regulate crypto, just generally, because like a lot of cryptos, you have to look at the code to see what happened, like their transaction and stuff. So it'll just be generally difficult to regulate it in the first place.
Aren't all crypto transactions public information anyway?
Yeah, they are, but they're all done through like so it's like a big number of like letters and characters, and that's like
through
your
code,
crypto
right?
wallet. Yeah,
right.
And that's like your crypto wallet, and you have to be like, no, unless you release it, nobody knows what your wallet number is, so it's all anonymous.
Okay, so it's anonymous yet it's public.
Yes, it's anonymous. Okay. Yes, yet it's public. Yeah,
okay.
because the blockchain technology, it makes it public. The entire
Right.
blockchain is public. We know every transactions that happen, and everybody who's done any transaction through Bitcoin, we know, but we just don't
Mm.
know who it is because the code is anonymous, right?
And that's the promise of the distributed ledger technology, right? DLT, which blockchain is a type of, and Bitcoin obviously uses, because because all the transactions are anonymous, decentralized, and they can't be, tampered in any way. That's kind of the promise of crypto. I think, look, I think lawmakers shouldn't regulate something that's still rather early on. Like, I think we're still kind of innovating. We're still innovating. We're still in the time that crypto hasn't developed, right? It's not a finalized product. There's different types of crypto technologies. Obviously, Bitcoin is still being developed, Ethereum, Cardano. And so if we impose these early regulations on them, obviously they're not going to have the opportunity to become what they're supposed to in terms of, the ultimate sense that they want to. And I don't think it's a good idea now, but in the future, like any other asset, right? I think they will need to be regulated. I just don't know, like you said, Matt. I mean, the whole purpose, right, of Bitcoin is decentralization, and that is by nature not it's not inclined towards regulation. And so I just
No,
honestly,
that's literally its purpose.
exactly that. So I
That's
don't
the
know how
purpose.
exactly. So I just don't know how the US government is going to regulate something that it seeks to literally overthrow in the future, the
Yeah.
whole US monetary
N-
system.
n-
So
No, I really hope crypto doesn't get regulated. I mean,
Yeah, I agree.
um, we when we spoke with Lawrence Lessig, right? He talked about the internet and how the internet was like this free place that you could do anything in, and
Exactly.
now internet is super regulated, right? Like the government has access to whatever you look at. All these companies have access to all your data. Like privacy is like you have to try to be anonymous in the internet now. And I hope crypto doesn't reach that level where it's like you have to really try to be anonymous, and it just stays the way it is, where it's like it's free, it's the privacy's there, and everything is good.
One can hope, but the government tries to take
Yeah,
over. I mean,
yeah. I
unfortunate,
think it's
but
that's
yeah.
just like it's just like the nature of the government. The government wants to establish control, and the
The
people don't
modern
want to be
government.
controlled. Yeah, the modern government wants to
Yeah,
establish control,
exactly. That
and
that's the that that's
but what
the
do you mean by the
terrible part
modern
to me.
government? What do you mean by the modern government? Like, what's that
so
supposed to mean?
So when the US was first created, it was supposed to be less federal power, more state power, more individual freedom. And now it's like federal, federal, federal. And if you don't do what the federal government says, you're somehow in the wrong. And I don't agree with that. I feel like, I mean, power is by nature what human beings want, right? And so I feel like it's just gotten to a point where we're literally kind of being controlled, and I don't like that status. I prefer, again, I'm a libertarian, and so I believe that humans should be able to do what they do and not be told like, no, you're in the wrong for this. And so that's my perspective, and I feel like it's kind of factual at this point.
I have to
I
agree with
just
I have to agree with Matt that the government, like even like in small ways, you could see that they try to gain more power every year. It just seems like in like small ways they add amendment here and there, and it's like, oh, now you have to follow this, you have to follow this. It just seems like, even though it's not like a bill that they're passing, like, oh, we have all the power and stuff, like it's not something that's just like straightforward. But like
Exactly.
in small ways, they try to establish more and more power every year, I guess. Or like,
And Jenish, the
as time
crazy part is
progresses.
it's not even just we're trying to control our country. It's like just like we were talking about, we're moving into or we've moved into other countries, and we try to create control there. And it's just, when does it end? Why can't it just be more lax and let people make decisions, whether it's for good or for bad, right? That's my perspective.
I want to hear Ibrahim's take.
Yeah, I
I
think he disagrees.
I disagree. Yeah, absolutely. So I, again, like you said, obviously humans by nature want power, right? And we live in a capitalist world, which obviously there's competition, freedom of choice by the consumers, and that helps us benefit from. There's certain advantages to that, but in terms of your overall question about or not, I disagree with you in that the government is taking away our rights every day. They want more and more control, and they don't want Americans.
Okay.
We live in the most freest country in the world. Listen, like I come from a country where my family and my community had no rights. So I understand like what it's like to not have any sorts of political rights. So let me tell you guys, we're incredibly lucky to live in the US and have all the rights that we do. That now, does that mean that we can just let the government do whatever they want? Obviously not. But I think this concept of rugged individualism, I think I talked about this in the last podcast, it's completely taken over the United States. And that's why we see so many people not getting vaccine, because they're saying, oh, I don't want to listen to someone tell me what to do. I don't want the government to give me these orders. And I think, again, like you said, I mean, in terms of
well, the thing is, it's happening. It's not like you can deny that it's not happening.
What's happening?
More and more.
Like, what do you mean is happening?
I mean, since the start of the country, I mean, in the beginning, there weren't as many taxes as there were. The taxes that were in place were actually to fund the wars that we were going in. And now it's like they're talking about, I mean, every politician says this, right? It's not like it's anything new, but the taxes that you're going to have this year, it's going to help the infrastructure. Buds, how long has a 5 freeway here in California been under construction? Tell me that. Okay. And then we take a look back, maybe back from in the 70s, when the 105 freeway was in place and they're building that infrastructure. It was done in 10 years. That's an entire freeway. This right here on the 5 freeway where Florence is and Downey right here, it was under construction for 12 years. And that's one off ramp. And so that's my point. It's like more and more, they're just taking advantage of us taxpayers, and money's getting taken away. And for whatever reason, I mean, not for whatever reason, people are allowing it. And because they don't know what to do, and there's no initiatives in place to kind of combat this. And unfortunately, the government has the power to do it just because it's snowballed into where it is now. That's my entire point.
Listen, so I hear you guys, right? I hear you. But what you're talking about, in my opinion, is incompetence. So a lot of people in government, at least on the federal level, in my opinion, are not the smartest of the people, right? They're not, just because they have law degrees or they go to fancy school, they come from families of wealth and power, doesn't mean they're smarter. They know what the right decision is. Like we were talking about, a lot of these legislators, they're usually older, right? 60s, 70s. I think the average age of a U.S. senator is in their 60s, right. And so they're kind of past that age where they're able to understand new technology and stuff like that. But what you're saying kind of is the state government's fault. I mean, that's not the federal government's fault.
It is the federal government's fault as well. I mean, highways aren't,
Yeah, but like that's like I in terms of your overall comment that the government is trying to take away our rights by
they're not trying, they're doing.
But what have they taken away from you? What have they
it's not away? No. So that's what you're misunderstanding. I think that's where you're misunderstanding, at least. I'm not trying to say that they're taking it away. I'm just saying they're acquiring more. Like it's like they're acquiring more of a say in our lives. That's my point. It's not like they're taking anything away necessarily, because this is very paradoxical, this whole conversation. It's like, even though they're acquiring something, it doesn't mean they're necessarily taking it away, right? But for somehow, it still infractures my lifestyle, how I'm going about my day. Like just something as simple as a freeway. It took me 10 more minutes to get home than it would have if it was just done when they said it was going to get done. And that's the point. I think I don't want to go too far off onto the taxes thing, because I have a lot to say about that. But it's happened, dude. Like since the 1700s, we've created literally what the U.S. is now. And I don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm a U.S. hater. It's more like I don't agree with where we're going. And I think greed and I think power fuels it all. That's what I think.
I mean, historically, I don't think that the country was founded upon the principle extremely individual choices and no sort of regulation or no sort of federal control. That was like kind of the argument right in the beginning. Do we give more states the rights, or do we give the federal government the rights? And so there was always
laissez-faire was kind of,
there was always the animosity between states' rights and federal rights. So we're still debating, right? Who should have more power, individual state governments or the federal government? So I don't think it was like the single principle that we were founded upon of
so what do you
only
think about
individual
laissez-faire
choice.
then? You don't think that was like a key principle? I think it was.
Yeah,
I mean, in comparison to where England was back in the day, I think that laissez-faire is a big founding factor.
I mean, you're kind of ignoring Alexander Hamilton's establishment of the U.S. Central Bank. There was so much centralization. I do
Fair.
get your point. I do
Yeah.
get your point that it seems as if our government is incompetent. I agree with that. The national federal government is very incompetent. I mean, look at the infrastructure of the US, like you were saying, right? That's why we needed this infrastructure bill, right? It can never get passed because nobody wanted to give the win to the other party. I agree with you that there's a lot of incompetence. And I don't think, but that incompetence is part. I don't think our politicians are that smart. They're trying to take away our power. I just think they're stupid. I just think that they just want to stay in office. I think that's I think that's my opinion.
You don't think greed is part of it?
Sure, it's greed for their own personal gain. They want to stay and have that $170,000 salary that they get as a member of Congress. Sure, they want to stay in office personally, but I don't
Whatever
think
other incentives they get.
I mean, yeah, if you're saying that they're corrupt, I agree with you. A lot of people in power are corrupt. That's the nature of power, right? But in terms of your point about they're taking away our rights, I don't think so. I think that's just a talking point that the right exploits
I think
to
so much of the
scare
government's just fueled by like all these big corps lobbying and like all the policy making that like it just feels like the whole governments are kind of like sheeps to the big corporations, and then in a way the big corps are kind of just like literally getting all of our data. They know who we are, like they know everything about us. They're selling everything. It just feels like less and like this is why I love crypto. It's this idea that it's like we have our own privacy. We can be someone that's not controlled. It's like this freeing concept, I guess, in a way. And it just feels like everything else is just heavily regulated and heavily like we know who you are, we know what you're doing, like all that stuff. And that's why I just really like crypto, and I hope it doesn't become super regulated.
So
Yeah.
what are you guys' price predictions for Bitcoin and Ethereum by the end of
100
2021?
to the moon, to the sun, man, to the sun.
It's gonna hit 100K, bud. Bitcoin's
Yeah,
at
I
100K.
agree. I think it's gonna go past 120 actually for Bitcoin. Ethereum
Oh, you do?
probably, yeah, $120,000
You
probably
think Ethereum's gonna
Bitcoin.
hit over 10?
So I haven't done my math on that. I'm not 100% sure the exact number, but I do think we're gonna double from what we are at now. We're at 3,200, so I think it's gonna be. It's probably, yeah, I think we're gonna go to 8,000, 9,000. We might hit 10K, but we're definitely gonna double from here on out, in my opinion. But I mean, it's so fascinating, right? When the Bitcoin was like going down a couple months ago, everybody was like, "Oh, this is it. This is over. It's over." But like people,
But that's the thing. People don't understand cryptocurrency. They don't understand the nature of
yeah,
volatility. And people,
exactly.
I don't know. I don't like how people go ahead and invest and they reap the reward instead of understanding what they're reaping. And that's kind of a problem with me, but that's a little off topic. So
Yeah, no,
I get
crypto has these cycles. It goes up and it goes
Right.
down. If you look at the longer trend, it's always a linear line going up. Like they
Of
might
course,
have
yeah.
these dips, and the dips can be 50, 60, 70%. I think that's why like people are so like shocked. They're like, how can an asset decrease in value by 70 to 80%? And then 2 weeks later rebound, go back above on the positive side. So it's never happened before. It's remarkable, and that's why people get so confused by it
It
and they
doesn't
get
matter,
scared.
guys. I don't invest in crypto. Just GameStop to the moon, guys. GameStop to the moon.
I think that's a
So,
good note to end our conversation, unless you guys want to cover something else or want to comment really quickly on something we missed.
No, I'm good. That was fun.
that was cool.
But,
Yeah.
yeah,
Solid.
sounds good. All right, good conversation. There's again like this had to be a little short. We apologize for that, but yeah, just stay tuned for our next episodes. We'll be putting out more episodes on a consistent basis. And thank you for listening to whoever made it till the end. We appreciate you. And yeah, take care. Until next time.